What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and it's just another video game journalism coincidence. That's right. Most video game news outlets today published similar articles talking about video games and how they're just so bad and they make them so mad that they won't say what they want them to say. Now, whether it's Apex Legends or it's the new Call of Duty or it's Dota or it's a Blizzard World of Warcraft or it's you name the game. Somebody out there with a blue checkmark who works for a video game outlet like Kotaku or Polygon is going to be asking, what does it all mean? What is your video game saying? Are you going to tell the millions of players of your game what to think and how to act? And more importantly, are you going to tell them what we want you to tell them? That, in my opinion, is what these questions are always leading to. And today there was a deluge of new articles all regurgitating the exact same thing, asking the exact same questions over and over again. Hey guys, a fan, one of you all, reached out to sponsor today's video, and that is SwordGuyStore.com for real, functional, high-quality, sharp blades from your favorite movies, anime, and video games. He sent me this awesome sword too, which is sick. SwordGuyStore.com has a special offer going on right now for fans of the channel. You can go to SwordGuyStore.com, enter the promo TQ free gift at checkout and get a free gift like one of these. All sorts of different stuff he included. Hey, the website could use some work, but the swords are awesome. He's got a Master Sword. He's got Nero's Red Queen sword from Devil May Cry. He's got a World of Warcraft sword. He's got all sorts of video game swords. Witcher sword. He's got anime swords, movie swords. So, hey, my first time I got to promote a fan of the channel, so check out SwordGuyStore.com. Link in the description below. Now, Eurogamer put out an article that said, why do we talk about politics and games so much? And Sophia Narwitz correctly points out it's because a clique of ideologically like-minded individuals have taken over the medium after forcing out people who disagree. And now you can force one-sided worldviews ad nauseum with little resistance, making your agenda to change the industry all that much easier. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that all this is happening today. Yep, here we go. Here's the one article. Here's another article. Here's another article, all from today. I'm sure there'll be more, but it's just a coincidence that three different outlets all put long, thought-out video game think pieces on the exact same day. And you look at all these type of articles, all they write about is the same thing over and over again. And there are some granules of hopeful messaging from the Ubisoft team in this article from Stephen Totilo on Kotaku. We know we're not taking our games far enough. A Ubisoft VP wrestles with the question. Now, you know, putting these things in a video game is not uncommon. In fact, I don't know why everyone was so like booty blasted over Far Cry 5. You know, the journalists saw the stuff in the game, assuming they actually played the game, and anybody who played Far Cry 5 could see the nods to the things that were going on in the modern day political landscape, and they commented on them. Where I think the blue checkmarks of the video game journalism industry are mad is because they didn't make the player think what they wanted them to think. They didn't comment on what it was, and they wouldn't publicly denounce anybody. This is called good business. Call it what you want, but you know, I don't think Ben and Jerry's is selling a lot more ice cream because they're constantly signaling out on Twitter. People buy Ben and Jerry's because, in their opinion, it's good. To me, I couldn't care less. I got this way on alcohol and fried food, but some people think it's good. You know, in this article, you know, some interesting quotes. This is from the VP. I don't see what we're being challenged. I don't see that we're being challenged on politics, he told me. It hurts me because we know there's a disconnect where we want to take games years down the line and what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, alluding to the fact that they must want to get it a little more spicy, a little more direct. He even talks about his own sons and how you know, he wants video games to help them make decisions in the voting booth, which is ridiculous to me. He's the vice president of editorial at the Paris-based team at Ubisoft. He oversees and advises the budget on company-all games. He works with the makers of Assassin's Creed, Ghost Recon, The Divisions, and more. In a rare interview he opened up, so they talked for about a half hour, and he goes, I was annoyed by the fact that we weren't given more forgiveness for not being perfect. He said to me at one point, reacting to the criticism of certain messaging in their games. We know that. We know that we descope. We know that we're not taking it far enough. In recent years, critics and reporters, myself included, have been asking game developers more questions about the messaging of their video games. Very often, the games are in question are Ubisoft. The thing is, when you're talking about Far Cry, yes, there are specific nods to things and mentions of things, but why do you need your video game company to come out and say it? Well, it's because you want them to push your message. I'm sure if Ubisoft came out and all of a sudden was, pro somebody you didn't like, you wouldn't be so happy. He goes, first time I voted, I think I was a stupid voter, he said, because I voted out of ideology and education and what I thought I knew, and the legacy of my family. I was puzzled. To my ears, these sounded like good sources of information. I agree. Video games, he argued, could function like simulations to make people smarter voters. He mentioned his sons, Nemo and Owen. I'd like to think that because Nemo and Owen will be in simulations where they get to iterate their vote and understand the impact of it in a fun way, it makes them more aware. So the goal here is to not be preachy, he added, slipping into talking about Ubisoft's games making goals. It's to showcase. This is a problem that this is an issue that Totillo had a lot of problems with. Essentially, Ubisoft is saying, or this developer is saying, look, we want to present as many sides as reasonable and let the game player make their own decisions. And that's where the video game industry is now. There might be nods to certain things. There might be references to certain things, but they're not coming out right and saying it. Now, of course, there are many indie developers that are doing so, but when you have shareholders, you don't exactly have this right. He pointed out that Watch Dogs Legion as a sign of things to come. It has no official main character and instead lets players assemble a playable roster from any one of thousands of virtually people living in the game's version of a near future London. When I look at the future, look at Legion. Legion is a step in that direction. Francois' framework might allow Ubisoft developers to speak more frankly about some of the politically charged ideas that people have already been including in these games. For example, the lack of POCs in Silicon Valley tech companies that explored in 2016's Watch Dogs 2. But it sidesteps a conversation about political ideas overall. Well, pardon me if I don't want to play these type of things in video games. If I want to talk about these things, I will. And later in the article, you could see that he basically says exactly that, which gives me a lot of hope. Francois was ready to leave me with some hope that Ubisoft's games will get deeper and more complex, and that the developers will be more willing to speak about these things in and around them. But then he also shared this idea. Quote, you're in a group in the division. If you don't see it in the game, forget it. Have a political conversation. Why should I be responsible for everything? The division can be a wonderful backdrop to talk about whatever you like while you're playing. You can enable these type of conversations. I don't want to author anyone or anything. I don't like being authored in real life. And I think when he says authored, he does mean preached to or preached at, but also like told what to think. And I think he's correctly identifying what video game journalists want. They don't just want video game companies to come out and address topical issues. They want them to pick a side. And from a purely business standpoint, picking a side when you have a consumer base as large as you do is not smart. Also, we know dang well they wouldn't like it if they quote unquote picked the wrong side. We get to the Eurogame article. It's the same thing. It can be a contentious thing, but that's no surprise, seeing as these things are contentious. Many of us would rather avoid them. It's a sentiment that comes up when players feel their escape into a fantasy realm suddenly reminds them of a real-world issue. However, it's impossible to completely eradicate them from our lives, even single aspects of them, and the development of games as such as in a talking point about them, we've come to realize that. I'd argue that, however uncomfortable, it's a good thing, even if with the caveats. Games now seem pretty entwined with politics, but they always were. Even when we think of it as discussion. During the height of the World of Warcraft boom, the loot boxes, the sheer endless back and forth on the topic of whether or not FPSs cause real-world actions, politicians have taken an interest in games whenever it becomes obvious that the games are a large force in people's lives. This is the whole everything art is... art is politics. Everything feels like this. Fine. Then they go, when these things feel shoehorned into a game, it's likely because the present political talking points is immediately recognizable. No, that's not true at all. These things can be quote unquote shoehorned into a game. When they feel shoehorned, that means it's not natural. That means it's not fitting with the narrative of the game. It seems out of place. It's not because you recognize them. Many people have encountered the catchphrase in games, but it leads nothing as I understand that reference and moving on. Heavy-handed mirroring that offers no comment on the issue and just moves, and the issues and just moves us feels jarring. I feel slightly different when it comes to the inclusion of women in POC in video games. I've previously written that how, as a person of color, I would love to see more positive storylines that involve people of color that don't center on bad things. There are still a lot of stories left untold, but in a society, the acknowledgement, okay, there are plenty of games that focus on positive things. You know, and again, you know, Candy Crush is an option. There are a lot of games that aren't touching on tough moments. I mean, literally anything on Nintendo would probably be fine for you. You know, I just think that when you see everything through this lens, the same way I ask after politics in a game, I ask after everything else. Why is there this? Why is this even in there? Giving reasons opens you up to further examination, but showing awareness that certain elements in games are charged with certain meaning is a better way of claiming to be truly neutral. No one is truly neutral, so if the games continue to reflect real-world locations, social constructs, politics, political statements, and intended discussion thereof to be part of that. Nobody cares, Melindy. Nobody cares. And when we see this video, this article, it basically just goes on to say, no poo video games are political. They're conservative. With picture of Monster Hunter World and Call of Duty Black Ops and you know, Modern Warfare Remastered, Resident Evil. And they go on to say, no. They're picking a side. Okay, fine, then don't play them. These games are declaring that the status quo is not politics and that anything challenging it is a frivolous coincidence for entertainment purposes only. What's wrong with that? I mean, I would say that 95% or more of people that play video games are playing video games for entertainment purposes only. The idea of being preached at in a video game is absurd. They don't want it. They want to relax. I think passive references to modern day issues is reasonable. But if a game paints a certain picture and wants you to agree with it, nobody's going to like that. You know, there's a reason that major, you know, AAA video games aren't like that. And of course, this article does reference, you know, there's no evidence of that in AAA game space, where marketing is most prevalent, trends towards progressivism at all. Its biggest products include FPS games like Infinite Warfare, Grand Theft Auto, zero-sum battles like Fortnite, and glorified advertisements of men's sports cartels that enrich oligarch owners and shoe company CEOs. Beyond that, the industry spends decades actively creating the environment for those reactionary positions to thrive. The mistake is viewing them as unseemly aberration rather than the fundamental aspect of business. And I will use my voice to read this quote. All Game did was put a name to something that always was there. The ESA reports 65% of American adults play video games. The market is now more or less everyone. But the perception of what a gamer is and what they want to play is still very tied to a very specific demographic. Young, cis, straight male who own consoles and expensive PCs and crave reassuring norms and escapist bad behavior. Okay. This article completely loses all credibility immediately, disparaging gamers. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. The idea that all these articles came out in the exact same day is no surprise. The idea that they're all parroting the exact same position is no surprise. The idea that nobody, and I mean nobody, cares is no surprise. I hope that you've liked this video and left your comments in the comment section down below, because I'm genuinely curious. How many of you log on to a video game and want it to tell you how to think? How many of you crave games to tell you what to think? And also, how many of you think it's just a coincidence that all these articles came out on the same day? I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.